Keir Starmer will declare that Labour is under new leadership as he asks people across the country who have turned their back on the party to take another look. In his conference speech Tuesday, in a bid to draw a line under recent failures, Mr Starmer is expected to try to restore faith in Labour's patriotism with a pledge to make Britain the best place to grow up in and the best place to grow old in. He will put his own party on notice and tell them it is its time to get serious about winning as he asks voters who ditched them in recent years to take another look at Labour. Mr Starmer will deliver his first conference speech as leader in Doncaster, where the party lost the seat of Don Valley to the Conservatives at the last election, in a bid to drive home the message that it must break from its recent past if it is to have any chance of winning a future contest. It has won the Holborn and St Pancras MPs most significant opportunities to date to speak to the nation after Labour suffered its fourth successive general election defeat last year. That result saw swathes of traditionally Labour seats fall to Boris Johnson's party, with Mr Starmer's party experiencing its worst election result since 1935 and handing the Conservatives a Commons majority of 80. Since his decisive win in Labour's leadership contest in April, Mr Starmer has doubled down on his image as an accomplished barrister with a forensic eye for detail. Through thorny clashes with Mr Johnson at PMQs, he has exposed the Tory leader's haphazard approach to the specifics and has clawed his party back to within just 2 points of the Tories in one recent poll. Last month a YouGov study found that a slim majority thought he would do a better job of running the country than Mr Johnson. But with elections won at ballot boxes across the country, rather than across the dispatch box in the Commons, Mr Starmer will say he recognises his party haven't yet done enough. He will say to those people in Doncaster and Deeside, in Glasgow and Grimsby, in Stoke and in Stevenage, to those who have turned away from Labour, I say this: we hear you. I ask you, take another look at Labour. We're under new leadership, we love this country as you do. Close quote. Unlike a normal leader's speech, Mr Starmer has been denied the luxury of a party conference hall filled with the thundering applause of loyal party activists. Instead, or as Britain is haunted by the spectre of a looming second lockdown, Mr Starmer will make his speech without his party colleagues, or the shadow cabinet around him, before rushing back to London to quiz Boris Johnson in Parliament on another emergency coronavirus statement. Labour insiders say that Mr Starmer's message will stand in stark contrast, not just with Mr Corbyn, but Labour leaders from the past decade since the party slumped from power. He is expected to reject the snazzy baubles of big policy pledges that have defined previous leaders' speeches, to instead talk about his patriotism, forged from the obligation he feels to a country that helped him succeed, and his belief that security, both economic and physical, is the first duty of any government. My vision for Britain is simple. I want this to be the best country to grow up in and the best country to grow old in. A country in which we put family first, Mr Starmer will say. A country that embodies the values I hold dear. Decency, fairness, opportunity, compassion, and security. Security for our nation, our families, and all of our communities. Close quote. And in an echo of the last Labour leader to win a general election, Mr Starmer will pledge to put properly funded public services and a world-class education which unleashes everyone's potential. But Mr Starmer still leads a divided party, and in the coming months, he will be forced to deal with more fallout from the party's recent past, which is not of his own making. Just 8 days after taking on the role in April, an 860-page internal report written by Corbyn loyalists on internal party hostilities to the former leader, which alleged the deliberate mishandling of anti-Semitism cases and internal plots to sabotage election efforts, was leaked. It prompted an investigation into both its content and the manner in which it became public, which is still ongoing. Alongside the long-awaited Equalities and Human Rights Commission report into the party's handling of anti-Semitism cases, they risk blowing Mr Starmer's efforts to rebuild trust off course and pouring fuel on the flames of the party's chronic desire for infighting. But allies of the Labour leader have told the Mirror that his message to the party will be to stop obsessing over internal divides and practice some self-reflection on what went wrong in the recent past. On the economy, Mr Starmer is expected to say that the way forward is a huge investment in skills and working hand in hand with businesses and trade unions to create high-quality jobs. And in a direct challenge to Mr Johnson, who has long promised a levelling-up plan for the whole UK, Mr Starmer will demand an economy that doesn't force people to move hundreds of miles from family and friends just to find a decent job. A country committed to a greener, cleaner and fairer society, where every policy is judged not just by how much it costs today, but by what it does for the planet tomorrow. A country which would be an active force for good in the world, once again admired and respected, leading the world, and leading by, for example, in tackling the climate emergency. Close quote. Responding to reports of his speech, Amanda Milling MP, company chairman of the Conservative Party, said, "If you take another look at Labour, the leadership may be new, but the attitudes to Brexit, immigration and the economy remain the same." For all his platitudes, the reality is that Sir Keir refuses to take a position on the most important issues facing our country, always preferring to cart from the sidelines. Close quote.